Hello, my name's Dr. Padilla. I'm a professor in computer science and psychology, and I've been a professor for over 5 years now. Today, I wanted to talk about grant writing. This is something that you should get in the habit of doing in your PhD, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. I happen to be very good at getting grants, and it started during my PhD. I found a particular template that I'm going to show you today that I was able to use for most of my PhD, and it led to very high grant success. So I wanted to share that with you, as well as the tips that I have developed over a lifetime of writing grants and as a reviewer of grants as well. So let's jump on in. My favorite grant template is by Kelsky, and this is the Foolproof Research Proposal Template. It's really fantastic. I found out about it in this book called The Professor is In by Kelsky, and she has a whole chapter on this particular grant template and gives you examples. I think this is truly, truly fantastic. I found that when I was first writing grants, I didn't have a strong template to follow, so they were a little bit all over the place. And then I saw this one and it really clicked for me how to write grants. What can happen when you're writing your first grant is you don't know what to put in which section, what to focus on, and then you might see something like this that can really guide you. Now, the tricky part about this particular grant template is that it is a hard reality into how you actually have to write grants, because some of these moves can be challenging. So let's take a look at what it suggests to do. It suggests to begin with a large general topic of wide interest. This is in order to ensure that your readers are interested in what you're doing. You might find that much of the work you want to do is very specific and esoteric. This is challenging you to pick a topic of wide interest to a big array of different people, and I think you should definitely do this. It then says in the first 2 paragraphs, that's what this little bit over here is saying, you want to briefly review multiple types of literature 1, literature 2, and then importantly have a however statement. This, I think, is the most essential part of this template, is proposing you need a however statement. However, for example, scholars in this field have not yet adequately addressed X. So what you're essentially doing here is you're establishing a problem. You're establishing a gap. You're establishing the thing that your grant is going to solve, and that is fantastic. The next part that people usually don't do, but they should do, is then describe this gap in the knowledge. It's big, it's urgent, it's important to address this gap, and you're a hero in that you are going to fill the gap with your particular research. And then you propose your research question. And this should all be done in the first 2 paragraphs. Now, before I go on, I will say when I first saw this, I thought it was crazy to do all of this in the first 2 paragraphs. Oftentimes when I was doing writing, I would need to start at the beginning of this field and kind of work my way up to the research question, something like this. This particular template flips that on its head and it says you need to start with the problem, and then you motivate the problem and describe how you're going to solve it, which I think is fantastic. I'm going to go through all of the elements of this and then tell you how I would update it for 2025 and based on what I've learned in terms of reviewing many, many grants and writing grants myself. The next thing it suggests that you should do is have the specifics of your project, and this will be dependent on your individual field, but you absolutely need a literature review. This should be a multi-page long review of the relevant topics. Then you need to follow by your methodology that you're going to use. This should be specific to what your discipline is. Now, the important thing for methodology is that you need to describe in so much detail what you're going to do. The trick for getting grants accepted is to ensure that the reviewers don't have to do any work. They don't need to use their imagination. They don't need to think very deeply. You need to tell them exactly what you're going to do, and don't require them to kind of allow you to figure out once you do their work what it's going to be. No, tell them explicitly exactly what you're going to do. You can always change it. There's no grant police that will come after you afterwards. But the trick is you don't want the reviewers to do any work. So tell them exactly what you're doing in terms of this methodology in extreme detail. After that, you always have a timeline. This is usually surprising to students, but you explicitly lay out when you're going to do which element of your proposal when. It needs to fit within the timeline of the grant itself. Then you follow with a budget and a strong closing statement. This is fantastic. I definitely think you should follow this. I have some modifications to this to make you even more successful. Okay, so I have put together 2 different opening paragraphs using this template that I showed you, as well as my modified version to the template. And I've color coded this. This is based on fictional grant proposal on AI and trust, okay? So the way that the original grant proposal would suggest you to start is a big topic of interest, like we have here. As artificial intelligence systems become increasingly integrated into high-stakes domains such as healthcare, criminal justice, and public policy, questions about how to ensure public trust in these technologies have become more urgent, okay? So big general topic, great. What I am proposing to do is, rather than just kind of lay out this topic, in the very first sentence, put in the problem statement. And why? I have read so many grants, and what happens is it takes the student or person submitting this grant a while to get to what the problem is. Reviewers have very little time. So immediately, if you can illustrate the problem that your work's addressing, the better. So my modified version of this puts the problem statement in the first sentence. And it will seem crazy to do this in your own work, but do it. Force yourself to do it. Put the problem in the first sentence. I have highlighted the problem statement kind of framing here in green. The growing body of concern in the development of AI systems is that interface design choices can unintentionally mislead users, leading to overtrust and flawed outputs because the field lacks evidence-based guidance on how to design AI interfaces that foster appropriately calibrated trust. What is going on here is it states the problem. The field lacks something. Here, in the first approach, it's just setting the stage, big topic of interest, which is actually what the original proposal framework said to do. So I'm suggesting right out of the gate, state the problem. Don't mess around, don't waste time. Then both approaches cite relevant literature, and this particular one proposes the problem statement here. Here we have the relevant literature, and again, reiterating the problem statement. We have a critical gap. Now, the next thing that both of these statements does is it says what the project will be. I have this here in purple. I aim to fill this gap by doing this various stuff. My research proposal addresses this need by doing various stuff, and it then reiterates the major problem that it's going to address. Now, the one I have, we have address this need, and then this is actually a restatement of the first elements in the paragraph above. To support this work and develop evidence-based guidance on how to design AI interfaces that foster appropriately calibrated trust. The key difference here is that we've identified a specific problem in the very beginning, and our work addresses that specific problem. It's a way of writing grants that focuses on problem framing. You have a specific problem that is well motivated by the literature. People in the world think it is a problem. You're illustrating that, and your project is going to solve the problem. It's easy. It's a simple framing. Problem, it's important. I'm going to solve it, okay? There's a very direct connection. And then what people will do as they're reading this is they will evaluate, can what you do actually solve the problem? So that's the major part of framing like this is if you're focusing on the problem, you have to ensure that the project that you're proposing actually solves the problem. And if it doesn't, I think you should rework the problem statement and your research, because ultimately we really do want to solve important problems in the world. That's the goal of grant writing. So if you focus on the specific problem and always come back to, am I solving that problem? You'll make stronger research and make a stronger proposal. Now, the other major difference between this original foolproof grant writing proposal is it says to do all of this in 2 paragraphs. I say do it in 1 paragraph. I've done this twice. This is what you would do with the original template and my updated version in a single paragraph. Do not mess around, do not waste time. The most competitive grants clearly state the problem quick and fast and tell you how that research will solve the problem. Okay, I think everything else within this template is very valid. I think this is a really nice approach. And again, in the book chapter, she goes over more details on how to do each element of this, so I think that is very valid. The only thing I'll add to this is a secret that professors know, the successful ones know, that you should maybe consider doing as well. And that is grants with pictures in them or illustrations of the process tend to be more successful. My grants have data visualizations in them, of course. But anytime you add an illustration of the work you're doing or a photograph or a diagram that outlays the different components of your work, those tend to be much more successful. It's probably some psychological bias, but there is a very strong correlation with grants that include pictures or illustrations and the ones that get funded. So maybe consider doing that as well. Okay, now I want to give you my checklist. After you write one of these grants, I want you to go through these checklists and make sure that you have addressed all of these different points. Point 1, have I clearly identified a problem? I'm hitting this home so hard because I find that people who are in the PhD process, they have a vague sense of kind of the area that they want to do research, but they haven't identified a problem. Even just figuring out what a problem in the field is can be really challenging. So push yourself, identify a clear, precise problem, and make sure that your grant describes that problem. Next item on my checklist is, have I explained why the problem matters to people outside of my field? You might identify a very interesting problem to people in your field, but if someone who doesn't study this explicitly reads it and they don't care about it, it probably will not get funded. So you need to pick a problem that people actually care about being solved. Imagine talking with, a relative, and asking, would you give me money to fund this, right? They should be able to think about the problem as you've stated it and say, yes, that is an important problem to solve. And that will increase the likelihood of your project getting funded. The next item on my checklist is, have I described prior work thoroughly enough to show that the problem remains unsolved? I definitely see this a lot with PhD students where they don't describe the research in enough detail to convince me that someone else has not already addressed this problem. This might mean that they don't talk about all of the relevant disciplines that might be contributing to this problem. They might just have a very surface level description of the prior research. You really need the literature to illustrate that you know enough to be able to very explicitly state that this problem is important and it hasn't been addressed before. That's really the function of the background literature element within these grants. Next item on my checklist is, does my proposal offer a solution to the problem? Great job, you've identified the problem. Are you solving it? A lot of times these proposals will have a really fascinating problem, and lo and behold, what they propose doesn't actually solve the problem. And this is something I see with faculty members applying to big time grants. So just make sure whatever you're proposing actually solves that problem. If it doesn't, maybe rework the problem, maybe scope it down a little bit so that what you're doing in fact addresses the particular thing that you've identified as a problem. Next item, have I described the project in sufficient detail so readers never have to guess or fill in the gaps? Do not make your readers do any work. They should not have to guess. There should not be ambiguity. Just tell them explicitly what you're going to do. You might not know all the details, so give them some examples of things you would do. Describe other processes that are very similar that you might use. Do not make them make assumptions or guess what you're going to do. My second to last item on my checklist is something that actually isn't in this framework, but is pretty well expected for most grants today, and that is a contingency plan. So have I included a contingency plan in case the project doesn't go as expected? A lot of times, the thing that you predict doesn't end up happening. So if someone gives you a bunch of money to work on this project and it just doesn't work out, then that money is wasted, right? So you can frame the project in such a way where if there is a change or something unexpected, that you can still pivot and have interesting findings from that work. We often call this a contingency plan, and it describes, what if my hypotheses don't work out? What if the data collection doesn't go as foreseen? What do I do then? And how do I make sure that this is still a meaningful contribution in the case that something doesn't work out? And the last item on my checklist is, can the project realistically be completed within the grant's timeframe? This is something that is very challenging for PhD students to do, and that is to scope the work that they're doing into an appropriate time frame. So if you have a very big problem like, I want to solve human consciousness, maybe everyone agrees that that is a problem, but you can't do that in the time frame with what you proposed. So you need to make sure that what you're proposing can truly be done within the various years of the grant time frame. Now, you might be able to start addressing the problem. So it could be that it's a big challenge and you're taking the first steps at that challenge, and that is okay. But you want to put that in the problem statement. You want to say, no one has engaged in this work. We need people to take the first steps. So when you're addressing the problem, you're addressing the problem of taking the first steps, not solving the entire field. Right, so that's my advice for crafting a compelling grant proposal as a PhD student. Definitely highly based on the template from this book, which is worth a read for other regards as well. It's a very fascinating book. You can tell that I've really loved this book. I truly love grant writing, and I think the more you get in the practice of it, the better you get. So definitely submit as much as possible. Everything is competitive now, so take the process very seriously and share your grant with as many people as possible, and they will give you really good feedback on these elements as well. If you found this video useful, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe for more content on academic success. Take care.